Thank you for watching the World Community Magazine's Hour of Power Live on Facebook with your host Edward McQueen and April Garner Davis.
Yes, and good evening to all of our listeners. Wow, this is Tuesday, the day after Labor Day, believe it or not. So, again, welcome, and I'm your host, Ed McQueen. Of course, my co-host, Miss April Garner Davis. And as usual, we are bringing you the community, what the community needs to know. So, April, I'll start with this question. It was the last time we've had really a natural disaster and a crisis that required addressing like quick life and response. It's been a while, right? Yeah. So we're ready to talk about that this evening, as was shown in the promotion, and we have some people with us with the help of Miss Priscilla Fuller, who coordinated this gathering to make compilation to make sure that things like these issues are addressed. So this evening we want to get with the necessary people of Horry County and beyond, if necessary, to see what it takes to address and respond to a crisis, such as a natural disaster, whatever. And this evening we have with us Mr. Lee Hendricks, is the Chief of Conway Fire Department, and Ms. June Wood, she's the City of Conway Information Officer. We're so delighted to have you all. You're probably coming just in time, okay? Because disaster is right around the corner. Now I'm not going to be Nick here saying, but this is hurricane season, right?
That's right.
Everybody agrees. So, April, you want to start off? Or you want to? You have any particular questions you think the audience need to be addressed right away, or we can go on and start talking?
I think we need to start with reminding our audience that they can pop in questions or comments. Like to join in the conversation. We certainly welcome them, and we want to thank Verdell Beckman out of Columbia, South Carolina, for watching. She is for our guest, she's probably our number one fan. She's always she's there, always in the studio waiting for this great information. She's from Horry County, and particularly Conway, and so this is always great for her. We'd like to thank Ms. Margie McIver for tuning in tonight. Hello, how are you? And typically we will recognize our audience members as they pop into the chat. And so why don't we just start with brief introductions of who you are and your roles with the city. Also joining us, hopefully a little bit later in the broadcast, will be Thomas Bell, who is the PIO for Horry County Emergency Management as well for this conversation. So we'll start with June. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what your role is with the City of Conway.
So my name is June Wood, and I'm the Public Information Officer for the City of Conway. I am a local, grew up in Conway, and Conway is home to me. So, you know, the message we deliver to the community and caring for our neighbors is important to me.
Awesome. All right. And Chief Hendricks.
So I'm Lee Hendrick. I'm the fire chief. I also serve as the city's emergency manager. I have two roles. I've been with the city fire department for 31 years. Started when I was in high school, worked my way through the ranks to the fire chief. And part of those duties when I became the fire chief was to become the emergency manager as well. So I get to see and do a lot of things, and this is one of them.
Mm-hmm. So the show tonight was organized with a couple of intentions. One, an aim to educate the community about what is now in place in terms of emergency preparedness, but also to advise the community of what they need to do in order to, get there if they aren't there already. And I think that sometimes people tend to kind of merge thoughts on who's responsible for emergency preparedness in our area. So it's good that we have both the city and hopefully we'll have the county here to represent, so that we can understand more about the responsibilities and accountability, and also just kind of how, everyone tends to play a role in emergency preparedness. But before we get there, let's talk a little bit about pretty much what we learned from our last natural disaster that required probably an immense amount of emergency preparedness officials and personnel to come on the scene to make sure that Horry County was taken care of. And so, Lee, I'll probably start with you just because you are chief of fire. And I'm sure that when it comes down to emergency crises, it runs the gamut. It's more than just, hurricane preparedness. It's fire in your case with wildlife or wildfires and things of that nature. So kind of walk us down the road of what it was like to handle the last major emergency in the city of Conway.
Sure. I'd like to just kind of back up and kind of go back to 2015. I had just become the fire chief and emergency manager, got hit with a major flood that we were not expecting. So we kind of had to learn on the fly a lot of things. So we took those lessons learned and started developing an emergency operations plan. And then a year later, Hurricane Matthew came, and that's when we had the winds, the destruction from trees down, debris everywhere, loss of power in 85% of the city. It's a whole different animal at that point. And then that was also followed by a flood. So we took those lessons learned, put them into a plan, and came up with a really solid emergency operations plan that was kind of more of an overview of what we need to do during storms. Horry County Emergency Management actually lined up a training session in Emmitsburg, Maryland in 2017, which was it was catered at the National Fire Academy, and there's a section of the National Fire Academy that's just for emergency management. And they catered a mock hurricane, and 80 people from Horry County. It was all department heads from Horry County, some from Conway, some from Myrtle Beach, and some from North Myrtle Beach, traveled to Emmitsburg, Maryland, and participated in a 4-day exercise going through from, the hurricane being a week out to a hurricane being 2 weeks past, or two weeks post. It was a very good hands-on exercise. I learned a lot. I took a lot of those lessons learned back to Conway. And then, as nature would have it, in 2018, we had Hurricane Florence.
Mm-hmm.
The difference in Hurricane Florence and these other disasters I mentioned was basically it kind of took a little bit of everything and mixed it together. And it sat off the coast and kind of churned for 3 days, dumped a lot of rain. As you know, the Waccamaw River actually flows from up in North Carolina down into South Carolina. So as it came on shore, the wind swaths and the rain pushed on shore into North Carolina and dumped over 30 inches of rain into the basins. So, we knew that we had a flash flood event in Conway, but we also knew that we were going to have, major flooding coming behind it. So I think the lessons learned in those 3 events put together had us really prepared for that event. It was a 21-day, almost 22-day event for us. We activated, went to OpCon 1, which means that we're at a full readiness state. Our emergency operations center was staffed with all the critical staff, and we ran it for 3 weeks solid. I think we averaged about 120 hours apiece working each week. It was a lot, but we took a lot of those lessons and we tweaked our plan. And I think we've got an even better plan now. And we've had a few near misses since then. We've had a few activations of the Emergency Operations Center since then. But I think a lot of our lessons learned came from Florence. And I think we were prepared, but I think we're even more prepared now because of it.
Mm-hmm. So, June, as the PIO, with all that he just said, I'm sure it's quite a chore for you to keep up with the community or even create a communications plan that pretty much informs the community of what's going on, the steps that the city's taking, all the things, right? So tell us a little bit about what you would do in a situation or in situations like what Lee just described.
So, as an emergency happens, information begins to spread. And a lot of times that information spreads a lot faster than we even start getting the actual storms itself. And a lot of times it's inaccurate. So, making sure that the public is aware of what the city's actions are and that we can partner with other agencies. We have really great relationships with Horry County Emergency Operations. We have really great relationships with all of our local municipalities. We have really great calls with them so that we can share information. But then on the side of that, we also have a really great network of public information officers in this area where we share a lot of information so that we're all putting out the same messaging that's going near and far, so that people can trust the information they're getting, and they're not having to rely on, influencers who do meteorology to get their information. So that's really the biggest hassle for getting any of this information out, is to make sure you're getting out timely information so that the rumor mill doesn't start swirling with information that's inaccurate. So making sure you're keeping people up to date with the city's actions, where they can find resources aren't necessarily even always the cities. We have a lot of great partners with our faith-based community, with a lot of 501c3s that can offer a lot of services. So making sure we're pairing all of that information so that they get correct information and know how to best take care of themselves.
Chief, can you tell us basically what your, I guess you would call a jurisdiction is in terms of like the city of Conway, and how far reaching your services would be if there is a disaster or a community emergency?
So we are just the city limits of Conway.
Okay.
And especially during disasters, we just handle the city, but we do work closely, like she said, with Horry County Emergency Management. So, Horry County Fire Department, Horry County Police Department, we all kind of work together to handle things, but we kind of have to draw the line and do just the city limits, because it's a big undertaking as it is. So we can't really extend beyond there during an emergency.
And you were talking earlier about an emergency operations plan. What goes into that type of plan? And, how far out do you actually create this plan? I'm sure it doesn't happen, a week out from a hurricane, or as soon as a wildfire happens or whatever. What goes into it?
Right. So like I said, after the 15 and 16 events, we kind of put the plan together. It's an all-encompassing plan. It covers everything from, hurricanes, tornadoes, civil unrest, large scale fires, earthquakes, anything you could think of could be used under that plan. And basically it's kind of generic and broad, but it also just kind of gives us a guideline that, who's in charge, who makes the decisions, who's going to handle what role. And it goes down in the weeds a little bit on, finances, and it kind of gives a little bit of a plan for hurricanes, as far as, hurricanes, you can see them coming, but a tornado you can't. So a hurricane, we have time to prepare usually. So we have, markers throughout those as it's approaching on when we need to make these decisions. One thing that we do, and I meant to mention this earlier, is that once a year we get together with all our critical staff with the city, which is our department heads, the public information officer, and a few others, and we get together and actually run through some of these scenarios, and we try to mix it up. I know we're in a hurricane prone area, but we try to do the large scale events that we may see, like a tornado, civil unrest, anything that we may ever see that we have to activate. We want to make sure we're prepared. So, we try not to focus just on hurricanes.
Yeah. So, and you're right, more of a focus on just disasters or community emergencies in general. But I'm sure that, you pretty much have extensions of your plan in the event of these natural disasters versus, something that is, a community crisis that happens like on the spur of the moment or whatever the case is. Right. One of the questions that was presented to us kind of centers around the growth of this county and our level of preparedness. It stated we have one of the fastest growing counties in the country, with literally thousands of people moving in, over the course of the year. And I know every time I visit home, I'm just amazed at how many new home starts there are, and land that's been cleared. And it's like, wait a minute, there used to be all trees, and now there's like 100 homes over there. So, are we really ready to deal with disasters that could occur in our area with the growth and the increase in the population happening so quickly? Has emergency preparedness been able to keep up?
Yeah, I think we're keeping up. Our plan, it kind of grows with the city, and as the city grows, we try to make sure we're plugging in those markers to say that there's more houses over here, there's more houses over there. One thing that we try to focus on the most is the flooding, because that seems to be our biggest troublemaker. So when some of these neighborhoods are built not necessarily in the floodplain, but near it. We have to, keep that in mind. So when we have these events coming, we need to make sure we're notifying those residents that they may experience a flash flood or a riverine flood on the back end. And that's something that kind of, is very important to us. And I know that during some of these events, what's kind of confusing for us is, some of these flash flood events, we may have flooding in this neighborhood, but not that one. And then the next event, it's reversed. So it's kind of hard to predict, but, we do make sure that we understand that some of these areas are more low-lying than others, and we try to keep up with that as well.
I think one of the most difficult parts when you look at growth is specifically where those people who are moving to our area are coming from and what their past experiences may be. So a lot of it is educational. People who have never experienced flooding, they've never lived in a low-lying area. They really don't know what to expect, and they want to know how to prepare. So I think it's a lot of education as much as us making sure we're equipped as a city, so that they can also be proactive in their preparedness for any type of disaster, especially when it comes to some type of natural disaster.
And in the wake of, let's talk flooding for just a second, since that seems to be the thing that, after a big rain, we're dealing with, flooding issues. As you think about the city of Conway, we'll just concentrate on the city of Conway right now until county can come on board. But when you think about the city of Conway, have there been some refortification of areas that are prone to flooding? And if not, is that in progress? Is it something that, needs to be taken a look at from a much grander scale than just the city of Conway in order to make sure that we don't have, or that there's mitigation of some of the major flooding issues that are going on?
So one thing we did, and this actually goes way back to 1999 after Hurricane Floyd, that was our first big flood event we had in a long time. And we actually had a lot of houses damaged around the North Conway area. So the city did what they call a buyback program and basically bought those houses back so they could never be built upon again. That extended into Matthew, and we actually implemented that plan again through FEMA and actually bought a lot of those properties and made them where they can never be built upon. They actually belong to the city. There's just green space. And so now that we've actually gone through those communities and tried to mitigate all those homes, we haven't had any damages since then. So that's one of our biggest steps. There's some grants in the work to do some things around the North Conway area. If you've heard of Chestnut Bay, it's one of the big projects that we're working on now. There's some stuff the city's working on kind of near that area. And I think those will help with the flash flooding. That's what the focus is there. So we're trying every outlet we can to try to do our part to make sure we're mitigating, the flash flooding as well as the riverine flooding.
Yeah. So, as we kind of take a look at what's to come, just like we mentioned earlier, we are in hurricane season, have yet to have a major event occur. Just some, rain and wind has come through. When that a hurricane is on the cusp of either coming ashore or at least grazing the coastline, what are some of the first things that you all do to prepare the community?
So the first thing we do is we get all of our critical staff together and start making the plan. We just follow the emergency operations plan. We determine timelines and markers to know that, by a certain day or time, we need to make sure some of these things are accomplished. Some of those things are making sure that our property is protected, making sure that we've got, protections in place so that we don't have any more damage than we need. We encourage our employees to make sure their families are taken care of because, once they go into that emergency mode, they may not be home for several days, which is always one of the most critical pieces for us. And then we just, it's every 12 hours. We do a 12-hour rotational period leading up to the event, during the event, and after the event. So every 12 hours, we're making a new plan, basically. And it's just all about kind of where we're at and what the needs are for that time. So it's, it's kind of broad, but it's also kind of specific to what the needs are for that specific incident based on, where the storm's at or what we need to do. Any type of evacuation order or anything would come from the governor's office. There are no, we're not in zone A, B, or C that they dedicate as, the know your zone for Horry County. None of that's in the city of Conway. But we do go door to door, and we do make sure we contact some of these low-lying areas and some of these communities that we know that could experience some potential damage, and make sure they know that the storms are coming, and make sure they know that they have a plan. So it's all hands on deck event for us. So people that would, some days be doing a task that may be inside the office, that day they may be out in the street knocking on doors, leaving door hangers for the storm. So it's all about what the need is at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have.
So when you go ahead. It's okay.
Go ahead, June.
So as the chief was saying, over the years we've built up a lot of historical information. We have flood maps, so we really have a lot of an idea of areas that are going to have some potential flooding based on what models say and what the National Hurricane Center and the National Weather Service tell us. We can kind of predict what areas may have feel some of that flooding. We did recently approve a purchase to buy flood sensors that kind of extend into some of those flood prone areas. So we're going to get even more data. It also allows for our staff not to have to be in those areas and determine what the water levels are like. We'll be able to get their flood sensors is what they're called. There may be a more technical name, but they're flood sensors that will be able to really gauge some of the areas that we really don't have any data other than data that we've collected. But it's going to be 24/7 data. So we'll be able to see, and there will also be a dashboard so the public can actually monitor their area as well to see if they should expect anything. But we have constantly worked on some of those areas and making sure we put things in place and try to get as many residents and businesses out of those areas so that they are prepared. And if not, we go and try to make contact with them.
Mm-hmm.
So I was going to ask about the new housing that is to be built. Do you what do you have a graphics platform, for lack of a better word, indicating to the prospective developer, indicating that this is flood level 1, 2, 3, 4 of the likelihood of this flood occurring? I know in some areas, geographic areas, especially in engineering areas, you talk about maybe a 50-year flood or 100-year flood, stuff like that. But there should also be some minute levels, like level 1, level 2, level 3. So if you can explain that, if it occurs, if you have one in place.
Yeah. So we call it our GIS department, and they have all of those layers inside of a mapping system. And in the initial phases, when they're wanting to put some of these subdivisions in, or expand upon a current subdivision, or build a house in an existing lot, there's a lot of discussions that go on behind the scenes about flooding. We have the maps that show the flood zones, show the potential flood areas, and we have it where it's built out to almost within a couple of feet of where the water was during Florence. So you can see on the map anything that flooded during Florence, which is, for us, is kind of the worst case scenario. So the information's there. It's actually available on our website, I believe. I think you can turn those layers on there. But there's a lot of discussions, like I said, that go on behind the scenes with that information. So they should be aware from a developer standpoint.
There is also a really great tool on FEMA's website. There are FEMA flood maps. You can actually go and just Google search FEMA flood maps, and there's a whole search engine. You type in your address, and it will actually pinpoint your address, and it will show you all the designated types of floodways and flood zones that are in your area. So anybody anywhere listening can put in their address. It's not just city specific, but anybody anywhere can go in, anywhere they're prospective buying, and they can see the actual flood maps that are built out by FEMA. Okay,
now for the segment of the population that does not have access to computers, and they don't seemingly it's an age group that seemingly doesn't want to be part of computers. How do you compensate for that in terms of getting the word out and making sure that they're publicly informed adequately?
So that is always a great question, is how do we reach the people who aren't plugged into social media or they're not checking things all the time? There is some really great resources I encourage people to always download when they're talking to me about this. And most people have access to some kind of cell phone now. And
Right.
there is, along with the same lines of what I was just talking about, FEMA also has a really great app that you can download. And I encourage anyone, even if it's not your phone, it's just someone, a family member that that needs to have access. It has the app that FEMA has, you can put your address in and it gives you alerts all times of the day.
Right.
I get them for thunderstorms. I get them for when the river levels are high, but it tailors it specific. So that's one really great way. We also work with all of our media broadcast companies and with our local radio stations. Usually around the time of a storm happening, I'll start hearing from all of the different media agencies and outlets asking me to come on and talk about what's happening in the city. So I'll go on to the news and talk about what the city's doing, or I'll go on the radio, go on radio stations. And those all seem to be really great methods. But I think there's another really key thing that people can do, and that's help your neighbors. If your neighbor isn't necessarily able to take care of themselves, or someone who can't, go and give them the information and make sure they have a great way to take care of themselves, or they know the different sources to get help if they need it.
That's great. It's good to know. Very good. The other option is that if one person knows, for example, if your neighbor knows it next door and you don't have adequate ability for a computer or whatever, if you can rely on your neighbors to get the information over to you, that they heard that there's going to be flood here and this area is going to flood, and they just got it off the phone, their cell phone, or the local news for that matter. I think that's a good option. Yeah. So is natural, not the natural resources, but monetary resources for your natural disasters, is that ever a challenge in Horry County? Is that how intertwined is that with the public, with federal funds or state funds?
So it's a slight challenge for us. Once we go through the event, my office spends the next several months putting all the information together, and then we basically make a request to FEMA, and then FEMA has to approve it, and then it goes to South Carolina Emergency Management for them to approve, and then they essentially reimburse us for up to 75%, sometimes 100% of the cost. So there's a lot of back end work that goes in that a lot of people don't see, but we do get equal compensation back to the city, so it offsets the budget. Florence, I think all in all we were at about $4.2 million, and we got about 3.8 of that back, I think is what my math showed. So it's pretty good. It's just, like I said, it's a lot on the front end. It does offset the balance for a while because it took several years to get to that point, to get that reimbursement, but it did finally come through. So yeah,
echoing what Ms. Woods informed us about, being that this is the Horry County depends on a lot on tourism for economics. That it's very, very important to get the information out there very, very adequately and correctly. So I can attest to that.
Right.
Yeah, and we, like I was saying earlier, our partners, our chambers, everybody stays really connected during these events. Not as much in the city of Conway because our tourism is not comparable at all to what the city of Myrtle Beach has, but they do stay very close in contact with those businesses. Those are all in evacuation zones, a lot of them, so they have to stay very closely in tune with what is happening along the beaches due to evacuations.
Yeah, and I think the information that's impacting Conway will eventually Myrtle Beach impact Myrtle Beach, because I think the natural formation of weather is from the west to the east, right? I mean, it hits Conway, usually hits Conway first, and you can verify that. I don't know. Is that correct?
Say that one more time. I wasn't following. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, the formation of weather patterns, which comes from the west, and it goes to the east. That's why it hits Conway first, I believe, and then Myrtle Beach. At least that's the pattern that I read about some time ago.
Yeah, it depends. We've seen it actually come from all different directions. So I know just like a normal, like a summer storm, if you will, like a strong cell usually does come from the west and then it goes to the east. But the hurricanes obviously come from the east to the west. Now, if you remember back during Hurricane Hugo, it actually made landfall south of us, which put us kind of on the bad end. It actually went onshore and was still a Category 1 when it went through Charlotte. So they actually had more damage there than they did here. So same thing with Helene. It went through the mountains of North Carolina, and because of the way it spun, it actually greatly affected the mountains versus here. So it was like a whole different animal. So we've seen some things in the past few years that we've never seen before. So there's always those new challenges that kind of bring to light that, the residents in the upstate need to be more in tune to hurricanes, which they never thought they would need. So, which kind of affects us as well, because, where do those people go? They're probably going to come south. So it's kind of like a twofold.
Mm-hmm. Right before the right before the broadcast, June and I were talking about this documentary that's out right now. There's a couple of documentaries that are depicting what happened with Hurricane Katrina. And God forbid,
just finished that last night.
And I saw the one on Netflix. I haven't seen the one that's either on Amazon or Hulu. Can't remember. But it was an incredible documentary to watch. Unbelievable, just in terms of, what appears to be the actual catalyst for the flooding of the city, in that the levees broke. Right. Because it was kind of amazing that they had such a tremendous hurricane came in as a Category 4, I believe, or maybe was like 5 and kind of slowed down to a 4 before coming on shore. But then the next morning it was like sun shining, and people were walking the streets and thinking that they were out of the woods, and then the dams broke, where the levee broke, right? And so when you think about areas like some of the areas in Louisiana, particularly New Orleans, that was hit with something so catastrophic, I can't imagine that there is an actual infrastructure like that here in Conway, even though we are a river town and we are surrounded by water. People always talk about the levees and things breaking, and no one really is educated about, where these levees exist, if at all, and also what the possibility is of something like that being breached. But what can you tell us about, what kind of creates a fortified wall around the city to keep something like that from happening in the city of Conway? Does it exist near or for us? And if not, is that something that we've studied from previous floods and hurricanes to, realize that we need something like that? So
the closest thing we really have to anything similar to that is Lake Waccamaw, which is kind of what they call the mouth. It's the top of the river. Mm-hmm. And if there was to be a significant breach there, it would take so many days to get here that it really wouldn't affect us. We might see some rise of the water, but it wouldn't be anything like you saw in New Orleans. Here it's so flat. We're right at sea level here. They're actually 10 feet below there, so it was kind of like they're in a bowl. So once the outside, once it collapsed, it just kind of poured into the city, if you will. It's a lot, and just kind of piggyback on, because you brought up Katrina, that was a Category 5, which is, 100, 130, 140. That's sustained winds. That means the winds are blowing constantly at that speed. That's a lot. One thing about Matthew here, the highest recorded wind we had in Conway during Matthew was right at 70 miles an hour, 75 miles an hour, and that was a gust. So, we've never seen, knock on wood, we've never seen catastrophic winds like that inland in Horry County since, I think, the storm in 1954. Which one was that? It started with an H.
Hazel.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that you saw what that did to the coastline, but we've never really seen that level of a storm hit directly into Myrtle Beach, thankfully.
Mm-hmm.
So that's stuff we have to think about. Are we safe in Horry County if it comes to that point? We'd have to make a decision. What could survive those level winds here? Even as far in as Conway or maybe Loris, or even into some of the other counties like Florence County. I don't know. A lot of things would have to be discussed, and a lot of decisions would have to be made in enough time if we had to do some sort of evacuation. Who's going to coordinate it and where are they going to go? Like I said, we're not in one of the evacuation zones for Horry County, but we can always strongly recommend an evacuation, and if we need to. So, I think if we got to that point, it would be all or none. We wouldn't just say, kind of like during Katrina, a lot of people decided to stay, and it was because of complacency. And that's what scares us, is how many times have we ramped up in Conway and in the surrounding areas because of possible storms, and then nothing happens, and they look at us and say, well, we went to all that trouble and nothing happened. Like, well, we go by the data we're given, and sometimes those storms have they kind of do their own thing, and they jog at the last second, which is great. I mean, it's a good problem to have, but it does cause complacency, and that's what scares us, I think, is, what if we do have a major event and people decide to stay when they should be leaving?
You're right about the typography and the fact that, New Orleans was kind of sitting in the bowl. You had Lake Pontchartrain, and then all of these, canals surrounding it. If you really think about what they were showing or depicting in that documentary, staying really was almost agreeing to not survive because of the amount of water that could be pumped into the city. And obviously that was pumped into the city. So I'm glad that you kind of explained that, Conway is not like that. We don't sit in a bowl, but the flat topography, though, we have seen certain areas where the flooding has happened, and you kind of scratching your head like, wow, are we really that close to water that would, cause this much flooding? I think that people just don't really understand what Conway looks like, because nobody's, unless you're looking at a map, you're not seeing an aerial view. You're not always standing over Conway to see, what's happening. But and speaking of which, you mentioned the Waccamaw. Are there other major river or lake systems that surround us that could create a perfect storm, so to say, if something happened?
So it's kind of complicated. You'd almost have to look at a map, but I can try to explain it. You don't have like a direct effect in Conway, but you have Little PD River that goes through, Aner, that part of the county up into Bucksport, and you have the Great PD, and then you have the Black River. The Black River actually goes a little bit up into the Bucksport area. Those all funnel into the Intercoastal Waterway, and they all meet and go into the Winyah Bay, kind of all in one shot. So the way I try to explain it to people is, you've got the ocean, you got Winyah Bay, which is kind of where all these feed into the ocean, and then it kind of backs up like traffic on 501. That's how I try to explain it. So you got all these rivers fighting to get into this area, and the Waccamaw is the furthest back, so they're going to back up the furthest, if that makes sense. So as all these rivers are feeding into that one area, which is what happened during Florence, there's, you turn your spigot on in your faucet, there's only so much water that can come out in one shot, and the drain can only take so much in one shot. So if you kind of think about it in those terms, as all these rivers are coming together into the Intercoastal Waterway, and that's going into the ocean, it starts backing up, and that's where you start seeing the riverine flooding, where it pushes back upland into Conway, and that's why we had so many problems during Florence. It's all that water trying to go into one spot. So it doesn't directly affect us, but it definitely indirectly affects us.
I know we focus a lot on hurricanes and flooding. I do want to touch on fire before we exit the show. We hear about like the wildfire type of instances that are happening, particularly out in the Carolina Forest area. Things that have happened over the past couple of years. In comparison to events like what happens in California, where, fire pretty much sweeps through an entire community or entire town and it's obliterated by fire. I guess that's kind of the closest we've gotten to it, is what we've seen in like the Carolina Forest area. But Lee, what is the likelihood that something like that could happen in Conway? In terms of our environment and topography, is that even possible in the city of Conway?
It's possible, but to the extent of Carolina Forest, or to the extent of like another state, it's not going to be anything catastrophic like that. We've got too many homes and too many breaks in the tree lines streets and all that. There are some areas of the city, and there are some areas that surround the city that you could have a pretty good sized fire, but like I said, it's surrounded by subdivisions and roadways. We could come in and create our own natural breaks, and we could probably slow it down a lot more than you could, let's say, out in the rural areas of Horry County.
Okay. All right. That sounds good. It's good to know. This is, we're educating the community on the possibility. So I want to say that joining us now is Thomas Bell, who is the information officer for Horry County Emergency Management. And Thomas, can you hear us?
I can. Can you all?
And we can hear you. Yay!
Apologies for the delay. My work laptop did not enjoy trying to stream, so we're on the phone. But we'll make it work.
That's okay. I think Lee's doing the same thing. It's okay. First of all, welcome. We appreciate you joining us. We've had a wonderful time speaking with June and Chief Hendricks about the emergency preparedness in city of Conway. And of course, we just kind of reserved talking about anything extensive in terms of the county. So before we get into that, though, if you will just kind of introduce yourself to our viewing audience. This is Thomas Bell, and tell us what your role is with the county.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for having me. I am the Deputy for Public Information for Horry County Government, but I also serve as the Public Information Officer for Horry County Emergency Management. That's really kind of where I started out in the county. So I definitely enjoy the weather part of the job, talking about the things that we need to prepare for. I always joke if I could have been a meteorologist, the good Lord would have made me a little better at math and science, but I get to at least live in that world with the role I get to serve here with Horry County. But it's an excellent role. I really appreciate the time to go and interact with the folks in the community, because I think everyone who listens into this podcast and everyone here knows we are a growing county, growing communities. We get lots of new folks who need to get this information year after year. So for y'all hosting this talk, it's great to get that word out there.
Well, thank you. And we do appreciate our organizer, Priscilla Fuller, for all that she did to bring you all together. Thomas, so Chief Hendrick and June have done a really good job of telling us about how the city has prepared for, an emergency crisis or what have you, be it, hurricane or fire or what have you. What is the county's role in all of this? And we understand that, there's only a portion of, our natural area. We think of Conway, we think of even the outskirts. And I think that sometimes people don't understand that there are boundaries and jurisdictions and only so far that the city can actually service. So when does the county kick in, and what exactly are you all responsible for in terms of emergency preparedness?
Yeah, so we are representative of the unincorporated parts of Horry County, which is actually where a majority of the population of the county lives. So, we talk about that 420,000 plus full-time residents. A majority of those folks live in unincorporated areas. Even if they have their postal address, it says Conway, it says Myrtle Beach. There's a good chance they're actually in county limits. I will say, as far as jurisdictions go, when it comes to these natural disasters, these hurricanes, those boundary lines, that's kind of where things, we don't see those boundaries, because we're all in the business of wanting to protect life and property at that point. So that is when you'll see county crews working very closely with the city of Conway crews, the city of Myrtle Beach crews, because at the end of the day, we all live in these communities. I live in the Carolina Forest area, which is unincorporated Horry County, but do I love walking down in downtown Conway during the Halloween times? Absolutely. So I want to see them thrive. So, what we do is we have plans and preparedness, and we do the exercises for unincorporated Horry County, because it is so vast. We are a larger landmass than the state of Rhode Island. Collectively. So, that's a lot of area to cover, a lot of people to make sure that they know what is best to do when it comes to being prepared for these storms or the different disaster events. And we just work closely with all of the public safety partners, the public works groups, the state agencies to, go over those plans, incorporate new equipment and ideas into those plans to test these capabilities and to respond when we have these disaster events, which, as I'm sure talked about, we've had a number of storms over the last 10 years or so. It's been an active stretch for us. So we really are the entities that just kind of brings everyone together. You think about how the government works, you got the federal level, then you got the state level, you got the counties, then the municipalities below that. What the Horry County Emergency Management does is we really just try to build those relationships, create those connections to make sure that, hey, city of Conway, they need, some piece of equipment, we can work through state emergency management to get that for them. Just really trying to facilitate those conversations, those connections, that collaboration. That's where emergency management plays a role.
Mm-hmm. Have you and June had an opportunity to work together on anything?
Yes, we do. Fortunately, I will say June does not love when she sees my name on the caller ID calling. So it's not a disaster. You just got a traffic light out or something like that. But we do get to work together. We're very fortunate. We actually have a public information officers network here in the county. So we collaborate both when, duty calls and there's incidents that require some collaboration, but also just on the off times to make sure, like, hey, checking in, how are you? What's going on with, your jurisdiction? How can we help out? Things like that. How can we grow and be better? Because at the end of the day, June and I, in the business of information. So we want to make sure we get the right information to the right people at the right time. Sometimes that's going to mean that they're in unincorporated Horry County and that they're also in the city limits of Conway.
Yeah. So when it comes down to the average citizen being prepared, ready for what could possibly be the next community emergency, what are some things that you all would advise citizens in the city of Conway and even just throughout Horry County to do? As I hate to say we wait for the next, but anything can happen. Storm systems are always forming, and we just don't know what's to come. But in terms of first aid kits, important information in knowing evacuation routes, what do families need to do to prepare for emergencies?
So first things first, as we are in that peak of hurricane season, we always say the best piece of news to get before you go to bed and when you wake up each morning is, what is the weather going to be? Keep an eye on the tropics. Just because things are okay now does not mean that 2-3 days later they're suddenly talking about something that has that kind of uncertainty over Horry County. We also want people to understand their hazards. Depending on where you live in Horry County, it depends on what you should be preparing for. If you live along the Waccamaw River or the tributaries, riverine flooding is probably going to be the number one threat that you're going to be most concerned about year after year. But if you're on the coastal areas of Horry County, along the beaches, storm surge is going to be that thing that you're probably going to be most worried about. Of course, anyone in the county needs to be aware of wind. We have a lot of lovely trees here in Horry County. I always say Carolina Forest. It's the old paper mill, so these are pretty much toothpicks. They can take some wind, but at the end of the day, how much wind can they take? So we always want people to understand what their hazards are, and then we want people to actually think of a plan on these blue sky days. Sit down, think about, hey, this could happen. What would I do? If I needed to evacuate, where would I go? We talk about knowing your evacuation zone. That really is just for coastal areas of Horry County. But we tell folks, whether you are in a zone or not, you can still evacuate. You can decide, hey, I don't want to be here for this storm. That is 100% okay. We encourage folks to understand what level of danger they can take when it comes to dealing with these storms, and also maybe what their level of uncomfort. Because at the end of the day, you might say, hey, I'm in a pretty good spot in the county. My home is maybe new build. I think it can withstand the winds and the rain. But if you're without power for 5 days, a week, 2 weeks, you're going to be without air conditioning, you're going to be without refrigeration. What is that level of discomfort that you can handle? So we always say to build your emergency kit for a minimum of 3 days. But we know with the big enough hit, our power, our internet, our data, our satellite, we could be dealing with stuff for a long time. So we just want folks to kind of understand, like, hey, if we say it's going to be really, really bad, we mean, or we think it's going to be really, really bad. So just kind of getting their mindset around that, because we truly have not been tested by a real wind hurricane, a real storm surge hurricane in a long time. And we just want folks to understand that big one will come again. It could be this year, it could be next year, 10 years from now, 25 years when I'm allowed to retire from the city system. So year 26 sounds good to me, but at the end of the day, we just want folks to be ready, to be prepared. And it all goes back to just getting that knowledge, educating yourself on the hazards, understanding what to put in an emergency kit, and understanding what resources are available to you out there, because there are a lot of resources available. Sometimes you just have to go look for them.
Right. June, you want to add
April,
to that? Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to, when you were talking about, Tom, we were talking earlier about the Katrina documentary. I don't know if you've seen it yet on Netflix. But, one of the things that really stuck with me the most was watching, the evacuees out of New Orleans go into Texas, and they were looking for family members. They didn't know how to contact anyone.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really important that families have your larger family network, not your immediate family network. You have an out of town contact that you can touch base with. It was devastating to me to watch people put posters on the side of the road with their mother's name because they didn't know if someone had evacuated her. Have an out of town contact because, the networks here, you're talking about not having cell phone usage. You're talking about not being able to get Wi-Fi, multiple days without power. If we were to have a large enough storm, you need to have out of town contacts, and you need to have your contacts written down so you have a way to get in touch with people, because when you're inside of somewhere that you don't have any electricity, you're going to need a way to have a common contact with your family or your friends so that everyone can kind of go around the same family and know who to contact. So that's a really great thing that I saw in that documentary about just having a plan outside of town, not necessarily just to your internal family. And like Tom was saying, your level of comfort, I think you have to also take into accountability what your needs are as a person. Do you have a disability? Are you living on an oxygen tank that you need electricity? So, there are things that you cannot wait to see how bad the storm is. If you need an oxygen tank to be able to live, then you're going to need electricity. And so you cannot stay somewhere that you do not have electricity. So really evaluating what your needs are as a family, or you're outside of your family, your parents that maybe live alone. If you couldn't contact them or get to them, they need to be able to have resources to be able to continue to take care of themselves.
That's extremely good advice. And, I think that anyone who hasn't had the chance to watch the documentary, it would be very sobering. And if nothing else, a true wake up call and in terms of pointing people to the importance of being proactive. And as Lee mentioned earlier, not being complacent, not taking anything for granted. And I know that it kind of felt like the boy that cried wolf because, we have another hurricane coming. But anytime I imagine we hear of a category anything coming through the area, we really cannot underestimate what that could be it a 1 or a 5. And so everyone just needs to be prepared. As we close out this segment, I want to ask if there's some emergency contact information that we can share with the community. Of course, we don't want to bombard 911 with, calls. I'm sure that there's some other numbers that they can call in the event that they need more information about, any type of, emergency situations that may be on the horizon, or just information in general to help them prepare. So where should citizens go? Who can they call if they have questions?
So I can say from the county's perspective, we have our own Horry County Hurricane Guide that is available to anyone who would like a copy. We have physical copies in a lot of the library branches around Horry County. I do know that Conway has some currently stocked, but we have them in all the branches, so that is a great first resource. We say if you have no idea how to prepare, grab that booklet, flip through it. Lots of great resources there in terms of numbers, websites, things like that. You are absolutely right. We don't want people calling 911 unless it's a true emergency. So in times of major disaster events, hurricanes, earthquakes, wildfires, depending on the scope of the disaster, we do activate a emergency phone line. It's a phone bank, so people can call with questions. They can just get information from that, and that is the general county information line. It's not active right now as the phone bank, but it does turn over to that when certain criteria are met. So that is just a great way to get that information as well. During the event, it's like I see the link for the hurricane guide is also posted online. So if you don't want a physical copy, if you just want to flip through it on your phone, on your tablet, you can get it from our website as well, HorryCountySC.gov. Yeah, there it is. If you like the design, I know who did it. If you don't like the design, never met the guy. But it is there for everyone's use for their glance. There is also the state hurricane guide as well. So both have very much overlapping information. This one is just a bit more specific to Horry County.
And I think we should probably touch a little bit on, we all work together very closely during these events. Whenever we do have any type of emergency operations center activation, the county actually has an emergency operations center that we actually send representatives from each one of the municipalities, all kinds of different organizations in the county. So when there are calls coming into the emergency operations center, they're kind of able to divvy those out to us through that tip line. And we also have representatives in the room. So there is a central hub if there is a severe enough incident that we all need to be together so that we can communicate effectively, independently, but also together.
Wow. So it's very, very interesting, and we're very appreciative of all of you taking advantage of this media today to address the questions and that we expected the public to see on. So I know it's coming to a close, but would all of you be receptive to not if you didn't have the this media as a venue, but to participating in a forum in any community that I mean, maybe together or just your department, but it'd be nice if the three of you, like we have today, would sit and just have respond and be responsive to all of the question and answers of a live forum, not electronic. I know electronic is always the best way to go, but if you were at maybe a church facility or a school, auditorium, something like that.
Sure.
Are you receptive to that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, would love to join. So would love to get one scheduled. That'd be great.
Yeah. I brought that up for the fact that, again, you have these people who do not participate in electronic media, and you don't want to miss anybody in your all's case. You want so. Having said that, April, what's your last word on that?
Oh, I'd just like to thank our guests today. Very informative, and we appreciate all of the work that you do, all of the long hours that you put in whenever there is a crisis going on in the city and in the county. I'm sure that we, as just the average citizen, have no idea what sacrifices you're making. And we can only thank you in advance for the work that you have done and will do. So continue the good work. And again, we'd like to thank Priscilla Fuller for pulling you all together, and Adam Emmerich for actually approving this message and allowing us all to come together. We appreciate him as well. So we just want you all to know that in terms of the community support, and I guess that's one thing that we can kind of ride out with is, as we think about what you all need in terms of support, what support looks like for City of Conway and Horry County emergency personnel. What can the community do to make sure that you all have what you need, and that you're feeling that you're being impactful with all of the things that you're disseminating, the information, the guides, the kits, the tips, the whatever. As a community, how can we support all of you?
Well, I think this is a really great example of one way that we reach the community. It's really important that when we are putting out messaging, who your neighbors are or your family are that aren't looking at social media or aren't following our messaging. So like I was saying earlier, it's really great for you to be able to share these messages with the people that you're closest to. Help make sure that accurate information is being given out. And when you see something that's not true, try to find correct information and direct them in areas that will actually get them accurate information.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'll piggyback on that. One thing that I've experienced, and actually this week alone, in the past couple of days, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and we call it, the clickbait. And someone will take one model of a hurricane run, which looks like, the end of the world, and they share it on social media just for the clickbait. And I get asked a lot, oh my gosh, look at this hurricane. It's a Cat 5. It's coming to Horry County. I'm like, no, it's coming off the coast of Africa, and it's 15 days away, and nobody can predict that. So, sharing the right information, but getting the information from credible sources is very important. Mm-hmm. That's why I think one thing that we tried to do after Florence was make a unified message from the city. You know, we had a couple of the shade tree meteorologists out there on their own personal social media trying to spread their own message. And we said, no, share the message of the city so everybody's getting the same message. So regardless of where you're getting it from, it's always the same. And that's very important to us.
Yeah, well, you want to add something, Tom?
I was just going to say the big thing that we see that folks fall into is that trap of complacency. So we don't want folks to think like, it won't happen to me, can't happen to me. It absolutely could happen to us here in North County, in the city of Conway, city of Myrtle Beach. So we just want folks to, take hurricane season seriously and to, follow the local authorities. If, we come out and say it's not looking good, we want folks to understand, we're not trying to hype it up, as Chief just mentioned. So just get on top of that. But yeah, stay aware and stay active.
All right. Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you all for being with us tonight. Yeah.
WCM Live, all right?
We appreciate all of you. And for our viewers, we know that you're always listening and watching, and you're always passing links. This broadcast will be available for the next week on wcmagazine.net. It's always available on our YouTube channel. And of course, you can do the playback through Facebook on World Community Magazine's Facebook page. And if you're a friend of mine on my personal page, you can see it there as well. So we just want to thank the three of you for being with us tonight. Thank you so much to our viewing audience. And we hope that everyone has a wonderful rest of the week. It's a short week. Yay! So I hope you all remain safe, and thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank y'all.
Godspeed.
All right. Have a good night.
Thank you for watching the World Community Magazine's Hour of Power Live on Facebook.